Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bhakti Fundamentals. Today, we're going to explore a Halloween analogy in the springtime. And why? Well, just imagine this for a moment. What if you put on a Halloween costume on the night of October 31st and then never took it off? The next day, you got up and went to work in your costume. You went about your life as usual, still wearing it. And what if, over time, you actually forgot who you were underneath your Halloween costume, and you began to think this, the costume, is me? In other words, if you dressed as a king, you'd think you were a king and would start acting like one. If you dressed as a doctor, you'd think you were a doctor. And then, from time to time, what if you changed costumes, and each time you fully identified with the new role or identity that went along with it, forgetting the previous costume entirely? This would be ridiculous, right? However, this is actually what material consciousness is like. According to the teachings of the Bhagavad-gītā, we are not our material bodies or even our material minds. Instead, we are each individual and eternal spirit souls currently residing inside our material bodies. The soul, that's us, is what actually animates our material body. And a key point to remember at this stage is the difference between spirit and matter. Spirit is eternal and matter is temporary. So when our material body reaches its end, it's not that we die. Our material body ceases to function and dies, but we, the indestructible soul within, leave that body and continue on to another body. In other words, we don't actually die at the end of this lifetime. Since spirit is eternal and we are actually spirit, it follows that we are eternal also. Therefore, at the time of death for our material body, we simply move on to another material body, one that fits our material karma and our desires, unless, of course, we've perfected our spiritual life and no longer have to receive birth again in this material world. That's an important topic, but for another day. For now, let's turn to the timeless wisdom of the Bhagavad-gītā, where we find an analogy that closely parallels our Halloween example today. In chapter 2, verse 22 of the Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna, the Supreme, explains that just as a person puts on new garments or clothing, giving up old ones from day to day, we, the individual souls, similarly accept new material bodies at the time of death. New garments, you say? Sounds a lot like a new costume, doesn't it? So to fit with our analogy today, we might say it like this: we're changing costumes between our lifetimes in this material world. Birth after birth, we put on a new outfit, a new material identity, forgetting our previous one, and more importantly, forgetting who we truly are. Beneath all of these material identities, an eternal soul who has an eternal, individual, loving relationship with Krishna, the Supreme. And mind you, our costume isn't always human. The body we reside in from lifetime to lifetime depends on our material karma and desires. Therefore, in one lifetime, we may inhabit a human body. In another, we may inhabit an animal body or some other life form. But in every case, the same soul, us, is residing within. We are simply wearing a different costume. Of course, this changing of our material costume doesn't just happen across lifetimes. It's happening right now, within this very lifetime. If you think about it, we're constantly changing our costumes. At one point, we were in baby and toddler bodies, then we took on the role of students, later perhaps professionals, and maybe over time we became spouses, parents, and so on. And with each stage of life comes a new identity. I am this, I am that. And in the moment, those roles can feel so all-defining, and some of them may even last for many years or last our whole lifetime. But many of them change even within this single lifetime. And it's not just our roles that are changing. Our material bodies are changing also. They're aging over time, and even the cells within our bodies are constantly turning over. Yet through all these changes, something remains constant. There's an observer, an experiencer of the material changes, and that unchanging presence is us, the soul. Now, in our analogy, while our material costume itself is not ideal, since we actually have a spiritual form that we can come to realize, what's even more problematic is our forgetfulness of our eternal identity and our relationship with Krishna, the Supreme. Because of our long association with material nature over the span of many material lifetimes, we begin to fully identify with our temporary material designations. We don't just wear our material costume, we actually start to believe that the costume is us. And we begin to identify with our body's nationality, ethnicity, or with our job, etc. And this material illusion is reinforced on multiple levels, not just by our gross physical body, but also by our subtle body, our mind, our materially influenced intelligence, and our false ego, our ahankara, our false sense of self. And our false ego only helps perpetuate our material existence. Our false ego is the voice that keeps telling us, I am this material body. And as long as we remain under its influence, we stay bound in material consciousness, or Halloween costume consciousness, if you will. So, how do we begin to break free from this cycle of misidentification with our material body and mind, etc.? What can we do to stop believing we are our material costumes? This is where Bhakti Yoga comes in. Bhakti Yoga is the spiritual process that enables us to gradually and ultimately permanently shed our material identities and simultaneously reconnect with our true spiritual nature. Through the powerful spiritual practices of Bhakti Yoga, such as hearing spiritual topics from the Bhagavad-gītā and Srimad Bhagavatam, which is known as Shravanam, through chanting the holy names of the Supreme, especially in the form of the Maha-mantra, this is known as Kirtanam, through associating with other Bhakti yogis, through offering our vegetarian food and our activities to Krishna, etc. Our material consciousness is gradually replaced with spiritual consciousness. And as that purification of our consciousness takes place through practicing the aforementioned, we begin to see more clearly that I am not ultimately this material role or that one. I am not my material body. I am the eternal spirit soul within, who has an eternal relationship with the Supreme. Chanting the names of the Supreme in the form of the Maha-mantra has an especially powerful effect. The Maha-mantra, shown on screen, is composed of the names of Krishna. And because Krishna is absolute, his names are non-different from him. Therefore, chanting Krishna's names is supremely purifying for our consciousness. Chanting purifies our material consciousness and replaces it with spiritual consciousness. In other words, it reconnects us with our original spiritual identity. As we chant, the layers of our false identification begin to fall away, and gradually we begin to perceive that unchanging self, the real us beneath the layers of our material conditioning, the same self that has been present through every stage of this lifetime, and indeed through all of our material lifetimes. So the next time you think of Halloween, remember this: material life is like wearing a Halloween costume every day and forgetting our existence beyond the costume. And Bhakti Yoga is the process of waking up to our real spiritual identity, remembering who we truly are, and gradually taking off our material costume so that we can clearly see who we are in relation to Krishna, the Supreme, and finally act on our eternal loving relationship with Him. And at the end of the day, isn't that far more fulfilling? Isn't it better to live in harmony with who we really are, rather than spend our life wearing fake Halloween costumes? So that's all we have for today on the topic of material consciousness being like wearing a Halloween costume every day. Please let us know your thoughts, and if you have any questions that we might answer in a follow-up session. In the meantime, thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next time on Bhakti Fundamentals.